Taking your law firm valuation to the next level with Gordon Van Wechel, episode 283. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I have an interesting guest for sure. The guest today is the owner of a marketing agency, but the topic that we're really going to be focusing on is preparing your firm for ultimate value. What does that mean? Well, there's different end games for you. Maybe you're planning on working in your firm until you're done, and then you're going to shut the doors. Or maybe you're going to bequeath it to a child who is going to follow in your footsteps, become an attorney yourself. But what if you don't have, what if those two are not the options on the table? What if you want your law firm to be your retirement plan? What if you just want to have maximum value from your firm to sell it to partners or to sell it to somebody else? So we're going to focus on some of those areas in this episode where what are the things that you can think about and consider and put into place to unlock that amazing value that your law firm potentially can have in the long run, in the long term. So before I bring him on, let me give you a little bit of the details on our guest. So our guest today is Gordon Van Wechel. He is the CEO, founder of the Alchemy Consulting Group, and Gordon has built and sold 3 national companies, as well as consulted with hundreds of local business owners in a variety of niches. He's the author of 9 business books and a frequent speaker at business growth events. He is passionate about bringing big ad agency strategy, tactics, and resources to local business and professional practice owners. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Moshe. Great to be with you.
It is awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise and knowledge. I'm sure it's going to be an awesome interview, but we're at the beginning. So let's get started. The first question that I have for you to just kind of get this conversation rolling and let our listeners know, who is this guy, Gordon? Never heard of him before, or maybe some of them did. There are 9 business books. I'm sure some people in our audience have actually read some of your books and are excited to hear from you. But tell us a little bit about yourself and, maybe how you got started with Alchemy or just the highlights of your journey that really are relevant to the conversation today.
Sure. I'll give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. I got out of grad school and took a job with a large national corporation, as many of us do. 2 years later, it was clear I couldn't keep my mouth shut and they fired me. So I started my own business. And as you said in your introduction, I've built and sold 3 successful companies. I've also launched several that were less successful, but such is the journey of an entrepreneur. I started Alchemy in 2003, really with the intent of trying to take some of the strategies that I had learned in building my own businesses and making them available to local companies who couldn't really afford to stroke a $12,000 or $15,000 check every month to a big ad agency and hope something happened. So from the beginning, we have focused on direct results that are quantifiable. Our month-end reports for our clients are pretty extensive, and we really try to quantify the efforts that we're making and justify the ad spend for our clients.
Awesome. I love that. And I love the whenever we're coming at a business from trying to help somebody who really, is an underdog because of capital, because of presence. I'm a big fan and proponent of that. So I love that that's where you started. And I know we're going to talk about what I said in the intro with, unlocking or creating the ultimate value of your law firm. But the question that I want to start with is, clearly you've been working with the underdog for a while when it comes to marketing. Where should somebody get started when they're first looking at, investing in their marketing to get the best results the fastest or have that fast ROI? so that they're not waiting years for those invested dollars to produce results. Like what, and I probably one size doesn't fit all. But I'm curious to know what are your thoughts on like the best place for somebody to get started to really unlock that potential?
Yeah, great question. And it's one we encounter frequently with local businesses and practices. The first step is to have a basic web presence. We have a product that we call Digital Jumpstart, and that's designed for the newer company or the company that hasn't really done a lot of marketing. And we want to make sure that you have a basic website. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be 50 pages, but it has to very clearly communicate your value proposition. Along with that, we want to make sure that you've claimed your Google business page. Again, this is an important cornerstone for getting found online because it's a high priority in Google's algorithm. So claiming that page, optimizing it, publishing content on a regular basis. And then the third would be some citation and directory sites, again, just to establish a basic footprint for search engine optimization. Once that foundation is in place, the next most important strategic move is driving traffic. You know, you've got that 24/7 salesperson out there in the form of your website. Now we need to get people to it. And that process is enhancing your online reputation, doing retargeting and banner ads, and then paying for Google and Facebook ads.
So with those ads, is the strategy to drive people just to the website, or is there something more than that? I feel like when somebody gets on a website, there's a lot of places for them to go. Could create confusion to the person who's landing there on where do they really need to go to find out what they're trying to find out. And I know it's really important to have a phone number on the website, but people who are searching on Google, they're not necessarily picking up the phone and calling a phone number that they see. They're in information gathering mode. So what's the ultimate strategy as far as where they land when you start to implement the paid ad strategy?
Yeah. Let me say one thing first in response to what you just said. You're exactly right. Most people don't pick up the phone. Google itself will tell us that 96% of the time a visitor comes to your site and doesn't take an action at that time, which is why retargeting is so important. Now, to your question on the paid ads, where you take someone from that ad is really important. Most of the time, we will build a landing page, just a single page website that specifically speaks to whatever the topic of the ad is. Sometimes that can be a page on the website. For example, if you're a trust and estate attorney and you have a specific trust package that you offer, well, we can take the person to that page on your website because that answers the question in their mind. It gives them the information they're looking for immediately. Otherwise, we'll build a landing page and take someone to that landing page. And from there, they can click to a website, they can click to a lead magnet, they can pick up the phone and call from there. But what we're trying to do is make sure that the person who clicks on that ad is getting their question answered as quickly as possible. What hurts our clients is if somebody clicks on an ad, goes to a page, and then bounces really quickly. Because what that tells Google is they didn't get the answer to their question. That affects our client's quality score. And it's the quality score that really determines how much you pay for an AdWords campaign. So we want to make sure people are getting the answer they're looking for as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. So real solid information there. You need to have a good quality score. Watch your quality score when you're running ads. And one of the last thing in marketing before we move on to the topic I really want to talk about, there are a lot of law firm owners out there that are still wearing many of the hats that they wore when they started their firm. Okay. So most people start their law firm. They don't start with staff. They start by themselves and they're wearing every hat, and they slowly start to grow into this place where they're handing those hats off to other people. So maybe they handed off some of the legal work. Maybe they handed off some, the answering of the phones, billing clients, things like that. Marketing is one of those things where you need some money to hand that off to somebody else. And one of the things that I see law firm owners doing is holding on to that for way too long. I mean, when we start talking about quality scores, somebody who's sitting there running their own ads, their ears are perking up. Oh, tell me more, tell me more. But I don't want us to tell them more. I don't want my law firm owners who are listening to this to be wasting their time futzing around in Google and Facebook ads, right? You're an attorney, you're a CEO, you're a business owner. You should be spending your time on the most important activities for your firm to grow. And it's not messing around in the Google Ads platform. So what are your thoughts, Gordon, on how does somebody cross that divide and get out of doing things themselves and bring on an agency to do the marketing work for them? How do they know that they're ready? Where do they come up with the capital to do that? What are you seeing people doing when they're first entering into the foray of having an agency do this work for them?
Well, the first thing that they're looking for is, what is the most basic, least expensive thing I need to get my presence online? Many times they'll already have a basic website, but oftentimes they don't. So we would start there. And then, as I said earlier, the second step is driving traffic and working on their online reputation. Most business owners and practice owners don't realize how important that online reputation is, that star rating. But it's one of the top 3 components in Google's algorithm for where a website is placed in the search results. So if you don't have an average of 4 stars and a significant number of reviews, your website has a less likely chance of being placed on the first couple of pages of the search results. So that basic reputation program is oftentimes where we start with a firm. And that can be very economical. I mean, certainly less than $1,000 a month to generate those quality reviews. And then we move to traffic from there. And again, retargeting is, well, you pay per 1,000 clicks, per 1,000 impressions rather than per click. So it's very, very cost efficient compared to AdWords. And again, if a firm has a limited budget to start with, that's where we would start, is let's take that traffic that comes to the website and keep your brand in front of them.
Got it. And I have questions about retargeting and all of that. But I want to jump into this other compelling topic that really isn't talked about a lot on this podcast. It's not really talked about a lot out there. But I'm sure that there are people who it's relevant for. Probably every law firm owner needs to be thinking about this in some way or another. If you're earlier in your journey, you probably think, oh, I don't need to worry about that right now because I've got all this time in front of me. But it's almost like, if I had to use an analogy, it's almost like getting a 747 up in the air, right? You need a lot of runway to get the 747 up in the air. But if you're not thinking about liftoff when you start on the runway, you're never going to take off, right? You got to be picking up speed to this magical moment where suddenly it's able to lift off. And I think that when we're building our law firm, if we're not thinking about this end game from the get-go, we're essentially on a runway, but we're taxiing instead of speeding up to take off. So let's start this conversation with, just give us the overview. I know that you have a framework of how somebody can look at their firm and in terms of what would increase the value of the firm, what would make it compelling to a buyer, what would just make it more valuable to the owner themselves. Let's start there with stepping through that process. And you can start off with coloring it as to why somebody should pay attention to this. I think you could do a better job than my 747 analogy, but I'll let you take it away from there, and then I'll pepper you with questions.
Right. Actually, the 747 metaphor was a good one.
Thank you.
Typically, what we find when a business owner is thinking about taking their business to market is they look in the rearview mirror. They're so excited about things that they've done to build the firm, and with good reason. But a business acquirer is not looking at what past performance is. They're looking at what the future is. And they're analyzing that business based on what's going to drive value when this owner is gone. So, why somebody should consider focusing on this earlier in their career. Let me give you 3 quick illustrations. The first one I would call Rembrandt in the attic. And think for a minute of, you're going to sell your home and you've got a 2,500 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-story on a nice cul-de-sac, good schools, nice neighborhood. And the next cul-de-sac over, there's a very similar home, same size, same number of bedrooms, nicely landscaped. You would think that both of those homes would go to market at roughly the same price. But if one of those homes has a Rembrandt, an incredible artistic masterpiece hidden in the attic, obviously that home has a lot more value. Well, it's the same with understanding your business. Businesses look very similar on the surface, but oftentimes there's hidden value in a business, in a practice that the owner may not even know about. But by analyzing the business the way that we do, we can often bring those things to light. Second image, cholesterol. Cholesterol, as the medical profession calls it, the silent killer, because it builds up in your arteries and you don't know it. There's no pain associated with it. And then all of a sudden it builds up to the point where you fall over with a heart attack. That's why they call it the silent killer. By the same token, there may be things in your business that will really impede its value at the time of sale. And by going through this process of analyzing your practice, you can anticipate those things and take the moves to correct them before the time comes to sell. And the final image I would share is Sully. You remember Captain Sullenberger, the guy who landed the plane on the Hudson 10 or 12 years ago. Brilliant pilot, been flying commercially for 30 plus years, trained commercial pilots, tens of thousands of hours in the air. But Sully had never had an opportunity to practice landing a passenger jet on the Hudson River. Well, it's the same with most of us as business owners or practice owners. We don't have an opportunity to practice selling our business. When the time comes to sell, we take it to market. And if we haven't analyzed these other factors, then we can very easily be leaving money on the table. So those are reasons why I think it's important that a practice owner spend some time really looking at these value drivers and how they can implement them in the practice in the early stages so that value builds over time.
Awesome. Okay. So we now understand why we should be looking at this. What are the things that we should be looking at? And I can tell you in my own inexperienced lens, I know that probably systems and processes are important. Probably the ability to have to continue to have clients coming through the door is important. Probably the people are important, and probably I'm assuming profitability is important. Those are the things I could think of. People, process, sales, profit. I mean, sales alone are nothing, right? Because if you're selling $1 million and you're spending $2 million, then it's not really worth a heck of a lot. Client list, I think, depending on the practice area, probably is worth something. If it's recurring business from those clients, or they keep coming back for more. But I imagine if you're a bankruptcy attorney, those clients don't usually come back frequently for more. All right. I just spitballed some ideas of what, in layman's terms, I might be thinking about. Now tell me what we really need to think about.
Well, all of those are important considerations. We use a tool called the Value Builder Score, and we've now had 65,000 business owners take this little 15 or 20 minute test. And that gives us a huge database of information that we can then take to what ultimately happened with those companies as they went to sell. And what we've developed is a list of 8 value drivers, things that we know will enhance the value of a business in the eyes of a strategic acquirer, or just another attorney who might be coming in to buy the practice. Some of those would be, hub and spoke. This is a tough one for law practices, because what we're trying to do with hub and spoke is take the business owner out of the center of all of the decisions. We want to have that decision making, the financial control. We want to have that distributed to people beyond the primary owner or the chief practitioner in the firm, because again, when that person sells or leaves, what happens to the firm? Does that mean that the buyer has to come in and take that role? Well, most strategic acquirers are not looking for a job, they're looking for an investment. So we want to work on trying to distribute some of the authority in the firm. Another one that we use, we call the Switzerland structure. And what we're doing with this one is trying to analyze whether or not a business has more than a 15% dependency on any one supplier, any one customer, or any one employee. And again, that can be relevant to a lot of law firms, many of whom have a couple of giant clients and then a lot of smaller clients. Well, if a significant proportion of the firm's revenue is dependent on a couple of those clients, I remember when I lived in Denver, I dated a woman who was a young attorney in a firm that handled Marvin Davis's oil company and then later his movie production company. Well, his companies were like 35% of the firm's revenue year after year. That's a problem because from an acquirer's point of view, if that client leaves, that's a big chunk of the revenue gone. Recurring revenue, you had mentioned that. Recurring revenue is extremely important because what that tells an acquirer is that there's going to be an ongoing stream of cash flow when the owner leaves. We're working with a CPA firm right now, similar niche, similar business, professional practice. And one of their concerns is how we can create that recurring revenue throughout the year, not just a huge chunk of revenue in the first 6 months and then less revenue the second 6 months of the year. So those are the kinds of considerations we take with recurring revenue. If somebody wants to get their own Value Builder score, they can go to alchemytransitions.com. It's a free instrument. They can just click on it, and it takes 15 or 20 minutes. But that'll give them an idea of these 8 value drivers. And then based on the results, that tells us which one of the drivers would have the biggest impact on the overall value of the company. And that's what we would concentrate on.
Awesome. And folks, we'll link up that URL in the show notes. So you can easily pull that up in your podcast player or by going to profitwithlaw.com. So these 8 are really, they really get your mind thinking. And my question is there one of these that's more important than the others? Like if we clearly want to focus on all 8 of them, but the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? So when you start looking at a list and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to like completely redo everything that we're doing, that could be overwhelming. So I presume that it's best to start with the things that are going to move the needle the most, both in present day as well as for future unlocking of value for the firm. So where do these rank as far as order of priority on where somebody should focus on starting to move the needle on them?
When you do the Value Builder score, it'll give you a score on a scale of 100 for each of those 8 value drivers. And what we find typically is the average score is somewhere in that 50 to 55 range, the composite, but some of those might be at 25 and some of them might be at 80. So we're going to analyze which are the low ones, because obviously those would move the needle the fastest if they can be applicable to the firm. Again, not every firm is going to be able to make adjustments in all 8. Every business can't make adjustments in all 8. But there's a good reason for doing so, because again, based on statistics now from more than 60,000 businesses, we know that a business that goes to market in that range of 50 to 55 is generally going to get 3.1 times either gross revenue or earnings after taxes, or EBITDA, whatever the statistic is, they're going to generally average about 3 to 3.1. But when they can move their Value Builder score up north of 80 or even into the 90 range, that's going to jump up to 7.1. So you can literally double the value of your company by working on these value drivers. And again, that's not something that happens instantly. That happens over time. If someone comes to me and says, I'd really like to sell my business in 2022, well, here we are on December 28th, I'm going to tell them this is probably not a good program for them because we can't move fast enough for them to be able to make an impact on their business and then get a business broker involved, because that's going to take another 9 to 12 months to actually sell the business. But for a practice that's looking, 2 to 5 years down the road, or even 10 years down the road, this is a great exercise to start working on and build that value over time.
Now, one of the ways that professional services organizations are sold is by the person who's buying it paying out a portion of the sale or the bulk of the sale through future proceeds over the course of time. So maybe like over the next 5 years, they'll pay out a certain percentage of profit towards the purchase price of the firm. Is that what you're seeing in the marketplace for law firms and accounting firms and stuff like that? And if that's the case, does this process help or hurt the results when it's reliant on the next 5 years after you're stepping out of the firm?
In many cases, there isn't just a sale closing like you would sell a piece of real estate and you get your proceeds check and you drive over to the golf course. In many cases, there's what you're describing is an earnout. So the person has to stay involved with the company in some level, some capacity for a period of time. That could be 6 months in an advisory role, and they may or may not ever get called. It could be 2 to 4 years, and the final payout percentage of the sale is dependent on what happens in the firm during those years. So there's a lot of different ways that transactions are structured. Obviously, from the selling owner's point of view, you want to try to minimize the amount of earnout or eliminate it altogether. You also want to make sure that you minimize the amount of that sale price that is tied to future earnings. But again, that's very common in the sale of a business. I would say it's less common in the sale of professional practices. Typically, if you're going to sell to existing partners. We've worked with some dental practices that as the practitioner decides he wants to sell in a couple of years, he'll recruit a young dentist and start to mold them to take over the practice. So it's different than a sale of a SaaS company, for example, where it's one company that comes in and they're buying the asset of the other company. But still, you want to try to build the value so that you can minimize the amount of that earnout that's tied up in the sale price.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a ton of sense. I mean, there's an argument to be made that potentially, if the person who comes in makes some good adjustments along the way, or really focuses on growth, that payout that payout could be bigger over time. But the truth is that there's a big wild card, right? You've been running your business for 20 years, 30 years. That would
be really unusual for that to happen. Typically there's a cap to what the seller can earn out in those following years, but there's no floor. So, and I think far more frequently we read stories and see and talk to business owners who have sold their business. The people who come in have all of these great ideas that aren't successful, and the owner winds up coming back in to try to take over and protect the earnout amount that they're still waiting on, or the installment sale amount they're still waiting on. So it's a slippery slope. You really want to try to avoid that earnout as much as possible.
Absolutely. It makes a ton of sense to me. And I definitely would want people to position themselves for the maximum benefit when it's time for them to step away from the firm. One of the things that you told me in the green room before we started is that focusing on unlocking the best value of your firm over the long term can also help you along the way with unlocking value in the immediate term. So can you give us some more color to that? And how does focusing on these steps actually help the firm currently in its current iteration? Because I think it's important if we can highlight some of that. Some people who are listening to this, might still be saying, oh, I'm still ways away from that, and I'm not sold on needing to focus on this right now. But if I understand that it has an immediate payoff as well, then maybe that changes the game a bit.
Yeah, great question. And we really do see a very quick impact for our business owners. One is the people on their team start to get a lot more involved in what's going on in the business, particularly as the owner starts to try to distribute some of those activities and train people to have a greater leadership role in the firm. It helps in their recruiting because part of the process is making sure that all of those operational systems are in place and well codified. Part of that when we work with a client is helping them determine what the needs are in the firm and then exactly who we're looking for those needs. So what we find is our business owners spend a lot less time recruiting and training only to find that it wasn't a good fit. So we help them with a lot of that up front. So there's some immediate impact there. There's also just the increase in client service, the ability to respond more quickly to clients, to generate more referral business through going through these processes. One of the interesting things that we do is what we call the customer net promoter score. And it's not a survey like you would typically take. It's literally just one question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, would you recommend this firm to your family or friends? Now, sometimes we'll add a follow-up question. Why did you use that number? Why did you select that number? But what the process is really very simple. If 9 or 10 are your top promoters, 7 and 8 are neutral, and anybody 6 or less is a detractor. So to calculate your net promoter score, you're taking your 9s and 10s and you're subtracting your 6 or less. And that's typically going to give you a number somewhere in that 12 to 15 range. That would be average. But the higher you can get that net promoter score above that range, the better the value of your firm is in the terms of an acquirer, because what that tells them is that there's loyalty there. And the odds are that many of those clients are going to stay with the firm because of their previous experience. So net promoter score is an important one of the 8 value builders. And by focusing on that, it really helps our clients enhance their client services and start to implement a better onboarding process and a better after the transaction process.
So essentially, by focusing on these various key metrics or indicators, what's happening is that the byproduct is you need to be taking actions in your business that you should be taking anyway, but now you have a reason for it, or you have something that's driving you to actually take that action. I'm trying to think.
You have a roadmap. You know, as we go through. Sorry to interrupt you, Moshe, but
that's okay.
As we go through each one of these value builders and work with the business owner to identify what the issues are in their firm and then develop the solutions. There's worksheets that we do with each one of these that are specifically targeted on what's going on in that firm. So it really gives the firm owner a great snapshot of their current situation and then a vision of where they could be, next month, 6 months. And as you begin to work with all 8 of these over a period of 12 to 24 months, they really start to see an increase in what's going on in their firm in terms of revenue, in terms of retention of key players, and less work, less time involved for the business owner. They're able to bring along their key people and distribute some of those things to take them out of the hub that we talked about earlier. Many of our business owners will tell us the single greatest value in going through this exercise was they're not working 60 or 70 hours a week anymore. They're getting everything done in 40.
Yeah, well, with my clients, my goal is to get them to 25. We want to have a life while we're doing this too, and I think that
absolutely.
There's a certain hustle mentality in today's day and age that we kind of feel like in order to be successful, we have to hustle and we have to be putting in these 60 to 80 hour weeks. And it's a big mistake because I recently did a training where I demonstrated I basically laid out this scenario. I said, let's just assume that when you hire a full-time attorney, that they can bill 1,500 hours a year, and that's low for industry standards. But let's assume that you want them to have a life, so then they can bill 1,500 hours a year. Now, if you're billing them at $400 an hour, and I'm against hourly billing, but for this example, we're going to use hours. They're going to generate $600,000 of revenue. Now, when you, as the law firm owner, are also the attorney, you're doing other things that are preventing you from doing those 1,500 hours of billable work. So essentially, by holding on to the marketing function, by holding on to the reception function, by holding on to the invoicing and billing, billing and collections function, all the different things that you're doing, but each of those things that you're holding on to, they're essentially taking that pie of billable hours that you have available to you and making them smaller, smaller, and smaller. So what ends up happening is by you doing all those things, you're creating a situation where you're stunting the growth of your firm because you don't have the capacity to take on more work. And therefore, you're going to prevent yourself from taking on more work. You won't work as hard in your marketing and your sales because you can't handle it. So it's almost like when you start to get into this mode of getting everything off your plate and just handing it off to other people, you're unlocking the true potential of all of those functions, because by you holding on to any of them, you are essentially stunting the growth of them. And I think that the ultimate, when you look at successful law firm owners, what do they have going for them? They're not doing anything. They're running the firm.
That's really well said. And that's certainly a goal that we try to instill in our clients as well. Is you have this expertise in your area. Focus on that and outsource the other things that you're not good at or that you don't have expertise in. I had an interesting experience, different business niche, but I wrote a book a few years ago on how to grow a roofing company. And I had this roofer call me. He says, I'm looking at your book and I want to know, how many roofs have you put on? And I said, none. He said, well, what qualifies you to write a book for roofers? I said, well, I'm not telling you how to put on a roof. I'm telling you how to grow your roofing company. What do you know about how to do that? So stay in your lane is the bottom line. And we have that conversation with business owners pretty frequently. And when they start to realize that they can trust their team members and distribute some of those things that they're doing, their quality of life is really enhanced.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is all awesome stuff, and we can keep jamming on this all day. I have one last final question for you. Well, one last question in the interview process, and then I do have a final question to put everything to bed, and then we're gonna bring this episode to a close. My last question is this service sounds incredible, right? I mean, your company takes people through this process. You gave us a link to a free thing that allows them to really see where they're at. But then I presume that you help people navigate through this process and unlocking the value for their firm and really help them step into the true potential. What is the size of the business that is appropriate for that service? If somebody's a solo attorney with no staff, is this for them, or is this more like, hey, you've got a 20-person firm, and we want to make sure that you're unlocking the value of that? Like, where does my listeners sit as far as potentially using your service, depending on where they're at in their business?
Yeah. I would say the solo practitioner is probably not a great candidate for the value builder process, unless their intent is to grow the firm, to start adding associates and support staff, and really grow a larger practice. But if they're a relatively small firm like that, probably not. We would be probably more helpful for them just doing some basic marketing things to keep their phone ringing. But typically, an owner with a senior partner or two and some associates, that's a logical place for the Value Builder program to be implemented. Whether their intent is to sell the firm or just step back and let the associates grow into a leadership role and pull some partnership shares out each year, whatever their ultimate exit strategy is, building the value of the firm will only help that. And by going through these 8 different value builder exercises, that's what the result will be, is to build that value in the firm.
Awesome. Yeah, that really helps tremendously, because I know that we have a mix of listeners. So I think that makes 100% sense. But your quiz or your exercise to allow them to do a self-evaluation, that would be relevant to anybody, and everyone should go and check that out. Here's the final 2 questions that I have for you. One is, if you can share like your best piece of advice to law firm owners out there listening to this podcast episode, what would that be? And the second is, if somebody wants to continue a journey with you, they want to touch base with you, they want to figure out, how do I take the next steps with your company? What is the best next action for them to take?
The next best action is, you can visit our website, learn a little bit more about us, and then we can set up a discovery conversation where I learn more about your firm. You can ask questions of me and learn what we do. And then from there, we can decide if it makes sense to work together at some level. And I'll give
that
you
website, Gordon, that website again?
I'll give you the 2 of them. Our marketing company is thealchemyconsultinggroup.com. And then the value building side of our business is alchemytransitions.com. And I'll give you both of those so you can have them in the footnotes for the broadcast.
Awesome. Thank you. And your one piece of advice?
Don't try to do everything yourself. It's the same piece of advice I give myself. I've built these companies, and, I tried to do everything myself for a long time and learned I can't, and that I'm not good at everything. So it's kind of what we've talked about a couple of times during our conversation, Moshe, is, focus on what you really do well, focus on the highest value, highest return on investment of your time, and outsource other things. That will help you have a better quality of life and enhance the value of your business. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just to double up on your piece of advice, I think that the sooner that, as a firm owner, the sooner that you can recognize that you're not in the business of providing legal services, but you're in the business of selling the expertise of your staff, that is when you start to recognize that, that's when you can really unlock the potential of what your law firm can do. And it's when you can also start to take a step back from the day-to-day activities that you're involved in. Because the reality is that if the name of the game is, I like to use the example of something that like we can really understand, like maybe like a waiter service. You're running a party and you need to hire a bunch of waiters, right? The person who's providing those waiters, he doesn't care about how much he's charging per hour for the waiters or any of that stuff, right? He just knows that for every waiter I'm giving you, I'm making a percentage on whatever they're making. So I would just want you to take as many waiters as possible, right? You're in the business of selling legal expertise. So the more lawyers that you can sell to the more clients, the better you're going to be. And you're in the business of making the spread between those. And therefore, there's no benefit financially for you to hold on to anything yourself. And therefore, the more that you bring on other people to do, and the more that you find the clients to put them to work, the more money you make. And then at the same time, when you look at that, the less time you have to spend working. That's really where the magic happens. And unfortunately, people take 20 years to figure that out because they held on to it for so long. And then all of a sudden they start to like, oh, I really need help in this area. I bring somebody in, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this sooner? And then they do it again, and they do it, and now 20 years into their journey, they're finally, bringing people on and outsourcing and doing all those things when they could have done that pretty much on day one. So I think that even if it starts with just like an inexpensive VA for a little bit of time a week, start to get into the habit of handing off like the easiest things that you can get off your plate to somebody else, and just see how that moves the needle for you, because it's going to unlock potential for you. It's going to create more bandwidth for you to spend time on higher value activities. And the more that you leverage that, the more you'll step into the role of CEO as opposed to the role of attorney, just basically replacing a paycheck. So I love that that's the thing that you chose, Gordon. And this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your being here with us. Folks, we're going to link up all of these, the websites that Gordon shared, and anything else that we mentioned in the episode. We'll link that up in the show notes for you. You can go to profitwithlaw.com. Our most recent episode is always at the top of the page. But you can find this episode there. I'm not mentioning the episode number because I have no idea what the episode number is going to be when this gets released. Usually I have that in front of me, but I don't today. But the link directly to this episode is profitwithlaw.com / and the episode number. So whatever episode this is, that's where you should go. This is a podcast. When people come to the podcast player and they're searching for episodes that they should listen to, they look at the ratings and reviews of the show. And they say, oh, this one has a lot of ratings and reviews. This one's rated 5 stars. I'm going to go take a listen to this one. So folks, we need your help. Go into your podcast player, hit that ratings and review button, leave us a rating and review. Hopefully it's a 5-star one. Hopefully you have good things to say, but regardless, we'd love to hear from you in that way. And if this is your first time listening to the episode, hit the subscribe button, because this way your podcast player will let you know when we release a new episode. And we are releasing new episodes twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. On Tuesdays, it's just me solo behind the microphone, sharing with you whatever I feel compelled to share. Usually I'm providing value. Sometimes I may not be, I don't know, but hopefully you think it's valuable every time. But on Thursdays, we have guests, and the guests come and provide value every single time. And we have rock stars like Gordon that join us on Thursdays and really share a ton of their expertise. And you just got it, folks, you just got it here for free. You didn't have to do anything. All you have to do is plug us into your ears and listen. So hopefully you'll keep tuning in again and again. And until next time, let's focus on our profit, not our revenue. Focus on our profit. Make sure that you're taking home every penny that you can and grow your firm. And this has been a great episode to talk about how to unlock your value, which ultimately is going to drive your profit needle. And that's really the name of the game. So that's why we call it Profit with Law. So we'll catch you next time. Take care. Gordon, thank you again. And folks, we'll see you soon. Have a great day. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.